All right, today we're tackling a big one, a true giant of world literature, Leo Tolstoy's War and Peace. We're going to dive right into this beast of a book and see if we can make it just a little less intimidating.
So let's just get the elephant in the room out of the way, shall we? This book is huge. We're talking over 1,200 pages and hundreds of characters. It's pretty easy to look at that and think, why would I ever do that to myself? And you know what? That's a totally fair question. But stick with me here, because the answer is way more interesting than you might think.
You see, the secret to cracking War and Peace is realizing it's not just one single sprawling story. Tolstoy actually built it on a really clear, deliberate structure. And once you see that structure, the whole epic gets a lot easier to handle. Here's the key. Tolstoy is weaving together two totally different kinds of stories. On one side, you've got Peace. This is a super intimate personal story about a few aristocratic families in Russia. You know, their loves, their heartbreaks, their search for meaning. Then on the other side, you've got War, a massive, epic story about Napoleon's invasion, filled with total chaos and a really radical take on history. The real magic is how these two stories talk to each other.
Let's start with the peace half, because honestly, this is the real heart of the novel. It's not about grand historical events, it's about real people just trying to figure out how to live their lives.
And we see this world mostly through the eyes of three absolutely unforgettable characters. You got Pierre, this kind of clumsy but big-hearted guy trying to find his place. His best friend Andrei, who's a brilliant but cynical soldier, and then there's Natasha, who is just full of life and passion. They're our guides into this massive world.
Now, if there's one character who really holds this whole thing together, it's gotta be Pierre Bezukhov. He is not your typical hero, not by a long shot. He's awkward, clumsy, and honestly, pretty lost most of the time. But it's his constant, heartfelt search for truth that makes him so real and so easy to root for. He's our guy.
And his journey is just incredible. He starts out as this directionless young guy who, boom, suddenly inherits a ton of money, which basically puts a target on his back. He gets tricked into a terrible marriage, and that sends him into a total tailspin. He goes on this deep spiritual quest. He even joins the Freemasons looking for answers before he finally finds some real purpose. His story is the emotional soul of the book.
Okay, so let's switch gears to the other half of the book, the war part. And what Tolstoy did here was nothing short of a revolutionary for his time. See, he wasn't interested in all the glory and heroism. He wanted to show you what war was actually like.
I mean, just listen to this. It says everything about how Tolstoy sees it. For him, a battlefield isn't some grand stage for heroes. It's a terrifying, unpredictable place where, for the average soldier, life and death are just hanging by a thread. It's gritty and it's scary. Before Tolstoy, war stories were usually told from the top down. You know, all about the genius generals and their amazing plans. Well, Tolstoy comes along and flips that completely on its head. He shows us war from the ground up, from the soldier's point of view. And from there, it's just pure chaos. Plans go wrong, nobody knows what's happening, and survival is pretty much just random luck. There's nothing romantic about it.
And this wasn't just him guessing. The guy knew what he was talking about. He was a veteran of the Crimean War. He'd served in the brutal siege of Sevastopol. He had seen all that unglamorous death and wanton destruction with his own two eyes, and you can feel that brutal experience on every single page.
So you have these two huge narratives, the personal search for meaning and the brutal reality of war. The absolute genius of this book is how they connect. And the answer is in Tolstoy's explosive philosophy of history.
At the time, the popular way to think about history was the great man theory. The idea that these powerful figures, kings, generals, a guy like Napoleon, just bend the world to their will. Tolstoy looked at that idea and asked a really simple question. Is that really how it works? And his answer was a resounding, world-changing no. For Tolstoy, the idea that one person, even Napoleon, could single-handedly cause millions of people to move across a continent was just completely absurd.
This is his big idea right here. History isn't driven by the grand plans of a few powerful people. Nope, he argued that it's the sum total of an infinite number of tiny, individual choices and actions made by millions of ordinary people. History moves from the bottom up, not the top down.
So these so-called great men, like Napoleon, they're not really in control at all. Tolstoy actually calls them slaves of history. They're just the people who happen to be at the front of a huge, unstoppable wave of human events. In fact, he says they have the least amount of freedom because they're just swept along by the current. The real action, The real cause of history is in all those everyday lives.
There's this one powerful scene that captures this perfectly. Our character Andrei is wounded on the battlefield. He's lying there, looking up, and his hero, Napoleon, rides by. But in that moment, as Andrei is staring up at this vast, infinite sky, Napoleon suddenly looks tiny, small, utterly insignificant. That's the whole idea in one perfect image.
So, okay, it's a huge book with a radical idea. But it was written over 150 years ago. Why should we still care about it today?
Because its impact has been absolutely massive. Tolstoy's raw, unglamorous take on war basically created a whole new kind of literature. You can draw a straight line from War and Peace to books like All Quiet on the Western Front, and even to modern movements like Poets Against the War. He fundamentally changed how we talk about conflict.
And this isn't some dusty old book that just sits on a shelf. People are still reading it, still wrestling with it, and yeah, still arguing about it every single day.
And you can see it happening right now. I mean, this is a real quote from a Reddit thread where people are passionately debating which English translation is the best. This is not a dead book. It is a living, breathing conversation that people still care a whole lot about.
So, here's the big takeaway. War and Peace completely demystifies history. It tears down the myth that it's all some neat story controlled by a few important people. Instead, it shows us that history is something much more chaotic, much more human. It's the messy, unpredictable, and beautiful result of all of our lives, all mixed together.
And that leaves us with one final, huge question. A question that Tolstoy basically drops right in our laps. Is history just something that happens to us, something we're just swept along by? Or, as he believed, are we all active participants, creating the story of our world together, with every single decision we make? That's the question War and Peace leaves you with. Thanks for watching.